Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I wanted to update my top 10 list of factions for 2020. Making a list like this is incredibly difficult because it's often influenced by what I play recently, and it can change as new pairings are discovered or new appreciation is developed. There are a lot of factions that I love, and narrowing them down to 10 is sure to leave some on the chopping block. But I also want there to be a method and continuity to the list so that you don't just get 10 random factions from me every time. If my list is too static, then it's lame. If it's too random, it's meaningless. Without spoiling the list, I think I'm pretty happy with the total amount of continuity and turnover. I waited until March Smashness was over to make this list because it was not only heavily influential, but I could possibly spoil some things from the tournament if I'm not careful. At the end, I'll address why I removed some factions from the list, because that way I don't have to spoil anything. So let's get to the list. Number 10 is new from last year's list, Ancient Egyptians. I have really enjoyed this faction from day one, and it's a shame that Burying has not yet been revisited since its inception. They hadn't managed to crack the top 10 previously, but the success of the Luch Egyptians really solidified them for me. It may seem like they lack a lot of obvious pairings, but at its core, Burying is just a means of getting an extra play at a deferred time. Extra plays are fantastic, but too many of them can make a faction appear too strong in any combination. What I really like about Burying is that it adds two particular nuances. When I bury a card from my hand, you don't know what it is, and I'm going to do something cool later, but you have to try to guess what it might be. It's uncertainty from a known set of possibilities, and I love that. But I also appreciate that, unlike other extra plays, there is real risk in Burying, as you may not get a chance to uncover those cards. Combine these nuances with a couple of really intriguing cards, and you have a very satisfying faction, in my opinion. They have great card draw, although there is a chance it may never get going. If not for a few underwhelming cards, and the fact that they could use a bit more uncovering, they'd be even higher. Number 9 is also new, the Halflings. I've wanted them on the top 10 before, but they couldn't push through, and despite them sitting out March Smashness entirely, I played them a ton in playtesting. In fact, there was an informal week of the Halflings where I played them with almost every faction because I was convinced they were great in all those cases, and they were. This playstyle fits me perfectly. They can get a ton of card draw from double lunch run. They have recursion and deck searching, rarely running out of minions because they can draw more and stack them. I really enjoy being able to strategically stay behind and then use the exact amount of minions I need, chaining them together appropriately. They have a great special for getting an easy second place, although it isn't that efficient in terms of cards. And finally, they have Rude Awakening, which is just a blast. It's probably broken because I've done some incredibly dumb things with this card. It's one of my favorite ways of ending the game, and can eclipse the power drop of comparable cards like Bulking Stew or Angry Mob. And if you play it on a lunch run base, you don't have to use it at the end of the game. It's a shame that this faction is tied up in Munchkin because they have nothing to do with monsters or treasures and are easily compatible with the game at large. I find them much more versatile and fun than robots, and I always want to play them more often than I get to. Number 8 is Musketeers. This is a somewhat significant drop from last year where they were 6. It's not that I lost appreciation for them, it's just that I've gained appreciation for others. What strikes me so much about the Musketeers is that they seem like a mathematical anomaly. They can pull off these immense power bursts, but from where? They only have 5 actions that directly increase power. Biding Time and On Guard give 4 power. They aren't known for extra minions, so One for All might give 1 or 2 power at most, and they have very little recursion. And yet, they make it work with Athos and All for One. There are several ways you can play this faction. Do you want more cards or more power? I always need a pencil and paper to play this faction, and recently I've organized it in a table structure to make sure I'm correctly counting all their power activations. But it's still fun, and they manage to do more with less. They have some great support cards, and To Battle is one of the best extra minion plays in the game. They can draw their cards in the wrong order, which sometimes slows them down, but it doesn't detract from the playstyle. Number 7 is also new to the list, Itty Critters. This is because Critter Champion keeps getting better and better as more natural partners are brought into the game. If your Power 2 minions provide on-play benefit, you need to consider the Critter Champion impact. At its core, the Itty Critters are a toolbox faction that have a lot of versatility, and I enjoy the task of figuring out which critter is best for the job. I used to find their temporary and timing nature frustrating, but they just kept getting better and better. My appreciation for Rainbow Rock has also increased over time. Even when you use a 2 terminally, it's nice that Critter Champion can act like Venus Mantrap. This is a faction that I will expect to continue to get better and better over time, and the Critter Champion will always be relevant. There were actually occasions where cards were changed because they were deemed too strong and too exploitable with the Itty Critters. If you are looking for more recent factions that pair well with Itties, I highly suggest Luchadors, Penguins, and obviously Grims. The Shapeshifters fall down to the 6th spot from number 4 last year, and again, it's not necessarily their fault. I still find their minions relevant. It turns out that I wasn't as bullish on Shapeshifter Vigilantes as I used to be, but it wasn't the Shapeshifter's fault, it was the Vigilantes, who were 10 on last year's list and didn't make the cut this year. They still have 4 unique minions that can form very intriguing synergies. Copycat with Critter Champion can be insane against the right team. Mimics can be ridiculous if you can exploit printed power. Gelf is still one of my favorite 4s, and the ability to pivot with Doppelganger is still a classic play. They will always have their minion starvation problem and could use some recursion, but there is no shortage of partners who can provide this, and I still enjoy them thoroughly. Number 5 is Elves, down from the number 3 spot. I really wish I got to play them more. They only fell for reasons that will be obvious when you see the remaining factions. I wish there was a way to have incorporated them into March Smashes this year, because their playstyle is the perfect type of wildcard to shake things up. I would have paired them with Ignobles. I just love how Elves turn the entire game upside down by providing a benefit to your opponent, but where you still get ahead in the end. Helping Hands can be very fun to set up and fits in perfectly with strategic second place strategies. The runaway specials are a blast. I don't know if I will ever top my 3-base combo using them, including one of those bases being a solo score. There are players who hate them and players who don't understand them, and I can see that to an extent, but I've loved the challenge of maximizing the value of cards that seem like they just should not work. This is another faction that really suffers from being in Munchkin because I think they could be a lot more popular than they are. Number 4 is Cyborg Apes, up 1 spot from last year. This increase was definitely due to March Smashness because Flying Monkey loomed large during the entire tournament. And while it's sad they couldn't take home the grand prize, they were extremely competitive and made it all the way to the finals, and I had a blast playing them. It's sad that my first ever loss with Cyber Musketeers was in the finals, but that was due to not drawing enough of the Cyborg Ape cards. Cyber Evolution is so strong because it can be set up in advance, and combining with Clyde 2.0 lets you be liberal with it. In one game, I got to play the same Cyborg actions 4 times because of Clyde and Cyberback. Cyberback is such a fantastic king minion, and if you give him any amount of extra action plays, he will take it and run with it, breaking 2 bases. They have solo base potential, they have double scoring potential. They have double scoring that can include a solo base potential. I cannot say enough about this team, and they can have some fantastic card draw too if it works out appropriately. They deserve to have moved up on the list. My number 3 is Superheroes, down from the number 2 spot. And it is definitely not their fault. There's just someone else who had a meteoric rise. Superheroes give me everything I look for. Instant minion retrieval, recursion, a diverse playstyle, raw power, and strong thematic appeal. If you think I went through my entire pantheon of superhero shirts in the Postmortem series, think again. Every time there is a new King Minion developed, I want to see what impact that will have with superheroes. In a game where drawing your best minions can be really impactful, I truly value having instant access to them. Some players may deem them slow, and their mild-mannered citizens are easily destroyed without their protection, but to me, it's the perfect avoidance of power creep while still not being 0 to breakpoint, which can feel unfair at times. I start with a 2, grab any 5, play Captain Amazing, use her talent to get 12 power, then finish it off with just his friends to get to 16. It's such a clean, repeatable play that can merit even more power depending on what 5 or more you grab. But they have to move down because of my new number 2, Anansi Tales. During his King of the Hill video, I mentioned that Anansi was the best king minion in a while, and he adds so much intrigue. Direct access to your standard actions, like a mild-mannered citizen for actions. In fact, he's a great mild-mannered citizen target. But you also lose those actions to an opponent, giving real risk to what you grab. It makes certain automatic plays not so automatic anymore. But when it is time to play those cards, you guarantee that you can use them. But when you think of everything else that the faction brings, it explains their instant rise to the near top. They have great card draw. They can tie up an opponent's hands with cards they cannot use. You have a real threat if they were to play your cards, and there's almost a mini-game of finding a way to get them to do so. You want them to derive enough value out of the cards you give so that you can counter with more value yourself. But this is also personal for me, because originally, Anansi Tales were a mess. They had no sting and simply shared cards, and I wanted more out of that. Granted, I based my entire interpretation of the faction on a single episode of Gargoyles, but Anansi was a trickster. There needed to be a cost to playing those actions. Otherwise, it's not worth giving away powerful cards. As a result, we created the Hornets and Python, and sometimes I've given someone one Hornet and played one of their cards so that they can react with a Hornet so that I can react with 3 Hornets. This faction, like Elves, creates such a mind game that they are an absolute blast to play, and seriously give faction number 1 a run for their money. But no one will dethrone the Rockstars this year, literally or figuratively. Their overall consistency is what led them to the finals and taking the crown. So many of their cards were at the forefront of that victory. Groupies are just an easy burst of power. Rickroll provides a lot of power as movement that you need to carefully set up. Classic Rocker and Monarch are your card draw engines. Rock of Love was often paramount and has so many interesting use cases outside the faction. They can do so many positive things: drawing cards, adding power, playing specials, movement, recursion. They get benefits for playing on bigger bases that greatly speed up the game before opponents have a chance to get going. I can pair them with almost anyone and have a great time because they are extremely self-synergistic and yet provide a nice array of abilities that complement almost anyone. I'm not saying that they are the best overall faction, and I don't think I will ever be able to answer that question, but I am always competitive with them, and I never feel out of the game. They never seem to get the fanfare they deserve, but they are my favorite, they are always a threat, and I will always sing their praises. So that's my updated list for 2020. Gone from the list are Vigilantes, who slid a lot because I'm starting to find some of their minions too situational. Giant Ants are still really fun, but they were already low on the list at 9, and weren't going to replace anyone above them when the new factions joined. The biggest surprises are going to be Innsmouth and Werewolves, who are both gone for the same reason. They're Titans. I feel like these factions lost what made them special. Their Titans are simply too good, and they get all the attention now. I think Sona said it well when he remarked that with Innsmouth, you had to choose between an S tier and a C tier, depending on using Dagon. There are some great Innsmouth pairings, but they are minimal in number, and each of them gets drastically better with their Titan, to the point of being unfair at times. And that's a shame. No Titan should provide this much of a boost, and I feel the same about the Great Wolf Spirit, who is starting to become a design casualty, preventing good talents from being created. I still enjoy them, but I do feel like they used to be mine, whereas now they only get attention for their Titans. Call me petty if you will, but it's my list. Were there any surprises on my list? Viewers seem to know me pretty well, so let me know in the comments, and let me know your updated list for 2020. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.